Hey, good morning. Happy Independence Day 2022. This is Wes Fryer. I'm in Oklahoma City. It is July the 4th, and I want to talk about preparations and a lot of different kinds of preparations. This is the second part, the third video, I did an introduction, of a series I'm calling Submarine Sermons, and this is kind of an eclectic mix of things. So this isn't like just a straight Sunday school lesson. This is a lot of thinking and reflection about preparation in our lives in a lot of different things. And so what I want to talk about today, I even took some notes. I want to talk about the submarine as a metaphor for preparation, thinking about how it's designed and it's how it's stocked, and then also how it's used. And then I want to talk about really, I guess, 4 different kinds of preparation. Preparation for things that are inevitable, whether that's an ice storm here in Oklahoma. We have those a lot, some other kind of storm, a power grid disruption. I want to talk about protection digitally and in terms of personally and for your home. I want to talk about emergency preparation, emergency preparedness, and then I want to talk about long-term preparation, things that you're not going to be able to just like get on Amazon and order something or do something quick, but it's something that could require training and a lot of thought and preparation and choices. So the first thing, let's talk about submarines. The USS Requin, which is in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, next to the Carnegie Science Center, and I had a chance to tour that on Friday. It's cool. It was neat. This is a diesel submarine that was in the United States Navy from the close, right after the end, I guess, of World War II in 1945 until 1968. It had like 24 torpedoes on it, 90 sailors, and they, had everything set up here to be able to see a little bit, get a little bit of a window into how the crew lived. But what I was really interested in, and was, this provoked a lot of thinking in this whole series of videos, the idea of preparation. Okay, I have friends. One of the teachers at our school was a nuclear engineer on a submarine, and they spent like months at a time under the water. There's a lot of preparation, a lot of thought, a lot of intention that went into the design of this machine, this transportation creation, this boat, but also the way in which the submarine itself was stocked, the skills of the sailors that were, were sailing, were manning, were fighting, from inside this submarine. And I think that we can use that as an analogy for our lives because, to a degree, we all live in different bubbles. One of the things that's wild about YouTube is something that Dana Boyd and other authors call context collapse. Okay? I have no idea where you are and when you are in time accessing this video. I may be dead. Seriously. I've lost friends now. I lost a really good friend in 2005, but his podcast that he created, Live On, man, it's kind of wild. Like the world in which we live, there's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of really, really good things. And one of the good things is we've got this medium of video to be able to share. But a challenge is, like, if you were at church with us yesterday, and I said something about faith, that wouldn't be alarming, or not alarming, but it wouldn't be surprising, right? Because that context, in YouTube, the context can be all over the place. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about this analogy. So we kind of live in different bubbles and different spaces. Our head space is different. One of the great things about YouTube and videos is the chance that it gives us to be able to think about things and consider things that we might not otherwise, be able to consider. You're getting to hang out with me today in the morning of July 4th, 2022. And yesterday, one of the videos that I did, my phone filled up. Gosh, I probably should have checked that, actually. And the whole thing didn't save, and I had to re-record it. It would actually be a better video if I recorded this because I wouldn't be as verbose. I always find that when I have to redo a video, I'm quicker the second time around. Okay, your body can't go where your mind has not. I took a course a couple weeks ago where the instructor said that. And I think that applies in a lot of different areas, especially as we talk about preparedness. What do you want to be prepared for? What kinds of scenarios have you thought of in your mind, some of which may be extremely reasonable and realistic, like, hey, I'm going to get a scrape. Hey, somebody's going to cut their finger. Somebody's going to need a Band-Aid. I mean, there's that kind of thing. And then there's other scenarios which, are pretty unlikely, but are still in the realm of possibility. Like, we're going to lose power at our house for a sustained period of time, maybe because of some kind of natural disaster, maybe because of some kind of cyber attack, or something big that's going to happen. I mean, hopefully we're not going to experience a breakdown of society, like has sometimes happened, in some large cities during some riots and things like that. Hopefully none of us are going to have a home invasion, but these are things that are in the realm of possibility. And it pays to think about these things in advance, not because we want to be filled with fear and we want to, I absolutely don't want to be filled with fear. I want to be filled with the fruits of God's Holy Spirit, which is, love, kindness, patience, gentleness, self-control. These things are gifts of God's Holy Spirit. I want those things to fill my heart. But on the other hand, I have different hats that I wear as a husband, as a father, as a teacher, as somebody who is trying to provide for our family and help provide for our family and protect our family. So all these things are important. I also want to note that, some of the preparation that we need to do involve lifestyle choices. They involve habits. Man, I want to prepare to live a long time. I want to be healthy. And that's kind of a topic that could be a whole separate video. And thankfully my wife, for the last year, has been on a great health journey and has become my health coach. But some of these things are going to become lifestyle choices, perhaps. They're also going to tie into identity. And maybe I'll do a video about that too, because our identity is a fascinating thing, and where our identity comes from, how it's shaped, and the choices that we make that shape our identity. Okay, last little preface comment is lessons from the pandemic and from ice storms. Well, and also weather, but mainly snow and ice storms here in central Oklahoma. So we are basically, I feel like, out of the pandemic now. Maybe we're not completely, but I'm recording this in the summer of 2022. The last 2 years, our whole global life has been incredibly disrupted. And one of the things which we ended up doing during the pandemic, I ended up doing, was stocking a pantry a little bit more than I had before. We live in a large metropolitan area. Oklahoma City has a little over 1 million folks in the whole surrounding, central Oklahoma City and then the surrounding suburbs. There's a lot of stores, there's a lot of shops. I love Costco. I actually shop at Walmart Neighborhood Market a lot. Sprouts, I've got all these grocery stores. But trucks bring stuff, and when you think about a disruption happening to the supply chain, how much food do you have in your house? How well could you, be able to weather a temporary disruption in, access to food, water, things like that. We have ice storms here, right? We moved to Oklahoma in 2006. We have lived here 16 years. And, in 2007, I had a chance to go to San Francisco to Macworld, and unbeknownst to me, that was the year Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. It was awesome. The bummer was we had a huge ice storm, the biggest one we've ever experienced. Over a foot of ice was dumped. Thankfully, my car was parked at the airport inside the garage, but power was down for days, and it depended neighborhood to neighborhood, how the grid was and what was up. But anyway, my wife was not really happy with me that I was gone for that time. Thankfully, we are campers. We have always kind of gone camping, and then we have camping supplies. And so some of those supplies and some of the skills that we have because of that, help us in that kind of a situation. Let's talk about these 4 different kinds of preparation. And my goal here is to just provoke your own thinking about whether or not you feel well prepared for these kinds of things, and whether you need to do more thinking and possibly more preparation in any of these areas. And I'm doing this for myself too, because these are topics that I've thought about a lot, and it takes time in some cases to sort of get the wheels moving for some of these things, because they could involve, stuff with your house, skills that you have. It could even be the place that you live, which is a big thing. We don't tend to move a whole lot. And then I'm also going to tell you that I'm an Eagle Scout. I was in Boy Scouting for a long time. I've, got to serve for a while as an assistant scoutmaster, a scoutmaster even for a little bit when we lived in Lubbock. I've been a Philmont Ranger. I've been a survival instructor for the U.S. Air Force when I was at the Air Force Academy. It's been a while since I've put on those hats. We actually had an outdoor club at our school this last year, and I had a chance to get some thoughts together with cooking. I love to cook. I love barbecue. I love to both cook outside, like in a camping context, and cook at home. And we actually had a camp out for our 6th grade at the end of the year. And I didn't get to share this, but I had volunteered to share some basic survival tools and techniques, which I hadn't thought of a whole lot. But anyway, all of these things have had me thinking about what I'm going to share with you. Okay, let's talk about inevitability. What I would say, stuff that is going to happen basically for sure at some point. Okay, think about the submarine here. We're doing the object lesson, right? I mean, people are going to have to eat, right? People are going to have to go to the bathroom. People are going to have to sleep. Like there's different things that we have in place in our homes and our lives, to take care of our basic needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I need shelter. I need safety. I need, food and protection. Then I can move up the ladder, for other kinds of things. So let's think about the inevitability of what might happen in terms of a power grid disruption, right? That can happen because of a storm. That can happen because of something like a tornado or powerful winds, an ice storm. One of the administrators at our school had a tree fall in his yard a few years ago. He had a power line, an overhead power line, bringing the power in to his house. Tons of people had lost power. And that's called the last mile, when it's the line that comes into your house. And it took weeks and weeks for a crew to finally get to his house and fix his power line. He had to move somewhere else and live with his wife somewhere else, for several different weeks. And so it's good to think about different contingencies and things like that. Where would you go if you lost power at your house for a sustained amount of time? Not this last winter, but the winter before last, the Texas power grid almost experienced a huge, cascading, devastating failure. Some of the articles I read said they were within minutes of a catastrophic failure that could have taken, at the best, weeks and perhaps months to bring back up. Like we're in Oklahoma, right? Severe storms do seem to have shifted somewhat more east into Missouri and just areas east, but we still have considerable severe weather, and we have great trackers and all that, but it is incumbent upon us to prepare for that. And whether we're talking about preparing, and we don't live in the south where Moore is and where they've had multiple F5 tornadoes. We have friends there and know people, that have lost homes and lost schools and lost friends, and anyway, there's all kinds of layers to that. But we would be basically stupid to not have some preparations for that. So we have a below ground shelter, thanks to the help of my parents. We've had to get in it. We know who we watch, the weather that we watch. Okay, so whether or not you are in like a tornado zone or not, we take a lot for granted today in 2022 as far as civilization and just what we need. The other day, like this happened a week ago, we lost power temporarily at our house, and it was going to be over 100 degrees that day, or at least in the high 90s. It was hot. Our air conditioner, fortunately in this house, we have 2 air conditioners, and we've had one go out before, and thankfully we have another one that we can go use. But what if all the power is out? There's no air conditioning. In the winter, the heater, if that goes out. So you got to think about food, fuel, and heat. And in inevitability, I would also put death, okay? This isn't something everybody likes to talk about. People don't talk about it a whole lot. But guess what? Every single one of us is going to die. And we have not been as diligent as we needed to be throughout our marriage and life, updating our wills, making sure our powers of attorney and our durable power of attorney for healthcare, making sure those things are updated. Also, at some point, and my parents and my wife's parents, my wife's parents are both deceased. They've both done wonderful jobs and did wonderful jobs, I think, preparing for end of life, with wills, with in some cases a trust, communicating those procedures. What needs to happen? What do you want to have happen? How have you put things in place? Passwords. We're going to talk more about passwords in a minute, but, do you have, access to your loved one's lock screen code on their smartphone, on their iPhone, or whatever kind of smartphone they have? Do they have their passwords in a password manager? Can you get access to those kinds of things if something happens? And that could be an accident, right? That could be some kind of debilitating accident. It might not be death, but there's a lot of those things. So I think being a camper definitely helps us for, having access to some fuel but do we have food on hand? I personally don't want to be an extreme prepper, like where I'm living and breathing, wearing camouflage all the time and a tinfoil hat, like, the apocalypse is near and I've got to, act like, the breakdown of civil society is right around the corner. On the other hand, I think it's foolish not to be prepared. And when you look at FEMA guidelines and other kinds of just really reasonable guidelines from the American Red Cross, from the Boy Scouts of America, right? Emergency preparedness. You're encouraged to have a supply with some water, with some food, and a plan. How would you heat your home? How would you keep your family warm in the winter, especially? How are you going to be able to cook? How are you going to be able to do those things? Okay, so that kind of gets into emergency a little bit, but I also think that fits in inevitability. And there are things on the submarine, right, they knew were happening. There's a lot of emergencies that may or may not happen, but there's things that will happen. And I would say if we are not preparing today for some kinds of disruptions in the goods and services and the provision of life-sustaining technologies, which I would include electricity and clean water and, sewer service. There's things that we take for granted, and we need to just consider what we would do, hopefully on a very short-term basis, to make it through those times with comfort. And it also might be how we could help other people in those times too, right? Because personally, and as a follower of Jesus, I believe we are called to serve, and that is not just ourselves and our family, that is other people. I had an opportunity to loan a teacher at our school. It was actually a propane heater, but he lost power for a lot longer than we did a couple years ago, and his bathroom was just freezing cold. And so we have this little, fully combustible, so it's safe for indoor, propane heater. But anyway, I had that. I had canisters, loaned it to him. Hey, they had a warm bathroom, in a really cold time. And so if we especially have resources, I believe part of what we want to be doing is thinking about ways that we can not only provide for ourselves and take care of ourselves, but how do we take care of our neighbors, right? Showing love to other people with our actions, by service, with, it could be food, it could be some kinds of tools or resources. All those things are good. All right, let's talk a little bit about protection. I did a TEDx talk about this about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. It's called Technology Fear Therapy. We need to think about protecting ourselves physically and also protecting ourselves digitally. We are living more of our lives than ever online, and so I'm not going to go into the real specifics. What I'm going to do is link in the description of this video to my TEDx talk. Again, you can just Google Wes Fryer TEDx. I've done 3 of those so far. The one you want is called Technology Fear Therapy, but it's about how we protect our families, how we protect ourselves. And the short version is you and I need to audit all of our passwords. Every password that we use on a website needs to be unique. That means it's not repeated. It needs to be long and complex. And in order to do that, you can't remember all those things. I believe you need to use, and this is a best practice recommended by many security folks, a password manager of some kind, which is a trusted service that you have multiple layers of defense, and I'll talk about that a little more, and that that allows you to have your passwords. You have a master password and a process of getting into that protected password, but it's multiple layers of defense. Hey, okay, let's just go to the submarine and let's think about the doors, right? One of the things I noticed on the USS Requin when I was on it Friday, were the different layers of protection in terms of the doors. We've probably all seen the Titanic movie. We've all heard about Titanic. They shut off and closed different parts of the hull trying to keep it from sinking. But unfortunately, the damage was such that it was inevitable that the boat was going to go down. It just could not, they couldn't shut out enough seawater. Well, in the submarine, they've got these different doors. And I really had to get low and, try not to bang my head because I'm 6'1", going through these doors, but this is a naval warfare vehicle, right? It's designed to shoot weapons, and they are prepared to be shot at. And so if they would take a hit in part of the submarine, it's not just one vast and big room, it's in different compartments, and they can seal off different compartments. And so when you think about your digital life, think about it the same way. You don't want somebody to have access to a password and then, oh my gosh, now they have your Bank of America account. Now they have your Wells Fargo account. Now they have access to your, email account. And that's really one of the it's like for people who are trying to do bad things to you, having your phone number, of course a social security number, but a phone number especially, and then your email account. Because if they can get access to that, they can get access to so many different things. So please, if you have not already, get set up with a password manager. Also turn on two-factor authentication, which is when you sign in from a new device, it sends you a text message, or you have a little key that you have to plug in to prove your identity, or you have to tap a button. Apple and Google are getting better with different ways, and biometrics are feeding into this. But all of that is super, super important, and I have a TEDx talk about it. Also, I hope in the coming, I'll say months, I hope to have a course about that. In fact, I will put this link on there, and it's not going to be active today, but courses.westfryer.com. I'd actually set that website up a while back. I'm going to set that up and link to some resources which are eventually going to include some online courses that you can take. And I think the first one I'm going to do is about internet safety and family protection. All right. So I'm not going to go into as much detail as I could about home defense. And I've actually really thought a lot about this. At this point, I'm not planning to do like videos that are firearms focused. Firearms are incredibly controversial today in our society here in the United States, and there's a lot of layers to that. But I grew up hunting. I grew up shooting. In scouts. I was telling my cousin, or I guess my brother-in-law yesterday. Anyway, it's like National Rifle Association sharpshooter. I qualified expert with the M16 and the 9mm when I went to basic training. And anyway, the decision of whether you're going to have firearms or not for self-defense is a big question. But whether or not you have guns in your house, whether you shoot guns, you and I need to think about home protection and the ways that we protect our house. Security and defense is a multi-layered thing. You don't have a single deal like, oh, I call 911, therefore I'm safe. I do believe that you are your own first responder. You need to be prepared to be your first responder. What did I just hear yesterday? Call 911. When seconds count, they're minutes away. This is true, right? Sometimes, again, we just take a lot for granted, and we need to think about scenarios. So the locks on your house, the ways in which, you have gates and things are secured, the lights that you have, the warnings. Maybe you have security cameras. Maybe you have automatic lights. There's a whole lot of different things you can do. Dogs, right? These lovely dogs that are playing out here. They bark, right? That's security. So think about home defense, think about layered security, think about the ways that you want to protect your family. As we're looking at a house, we're moving to North Carolina at the end of this month. Ideally, I would love to have a safe room. We have safe rooms here in central Oklahoma for tornadoes, but there's also safe rooms in terms of home invasion. And I know this kind of stuff is not great to think about, but guess what? Your body can't go places your mind hasn't gone. One of the things we learn, in first aid training, in the Air Force, I was in pilot training. I had 52 hours in the T-37 before I washed out. It was sad. But I am thankful and fortunate for the time that I had training. One of the reasons you train and you memorize emergency procedures and you do these things is that when something happens, you know how to respond. You do what your training has taught you to do. And like I said, I don't personally want to be living in fear, and I don't want to be in a situation where I just am, I'm completely defined by being a prepper and a doomsday preparedness person. But on the other hand, it would be dumb and stupid for me not to think about some of these things and to take some actions. Okay, I am really talking longer than I had planned to. I hope my phone saves this because I'm going to be bummed if it doesn't. All right, so that was protection. Let's talk about emergency. Do you have a fire escape plan for your house? How likely is it that you're going to have a fire in your house? Hopefully that's not very likely, but one of the things that the firemen will tell you, and we do this in school when we go visit fire stations with young kids, what's the plan? Do you have an evacuation plan? Do you know how to get out? Are there multiple ways to get out? Do you have a rendezvous point that you're going to go to? How about severe weather? What is your plan? What is the plan if not everyone is home? Does everybody, and depending on age, have a good sense of how to open up the storm shelter, how to get in there? What are you going to do with your dogs? Okay, we have put our dogs down in our storm shelter before. With our previous dogs like that, we were like, no, okay, your guys are going in the bathroom. It's central, windowless, middle of the house kind of bathroom. But the last time we had storms, we took our dogs down there, but there's a lot of different aspects of this. Rehearsal, practice, we actually have rehearsed getting down in our storm shelter. Other emergencies, talk about first aid. How's your first aid kit? Do you have a first aid kit you can grab and take? We've gone on some more hikes. In fact, we may do that today. That'd be a lovely thing to do for the 4th of July is go on a hike. I've got a fanny pack that's an emergency kit, and I take it camping. I took it on our 6th grade camp out that we had. I try to keep it stocked with things, right? I just bought a couple bandanas, when I was in Pittsburgh. I just happened to see these in a store, and that's one of the most useful things to have is just a bandana to use as a triangular bandage. You can use it as a tourniquet. You can just use it to apply direct pressure to stop bleeding. You can do all kinds of things, but do you have that, and is it readily accessible to you? Medications, right? It's crazy when we have rumors of a storm here in central Oklahoma, oh my gosh, the shelves just start to disappear. Maybe I'll put a picture in here. I took some pictures early in the pandemic when the lockdown happened. Oh my gosh, store shelves just all the meat, it's gone. There were other things that just completely disappeared, and everybody had snatched those things. There was a lot of fear. Guess when the best time to go to the grocery store to stock up your pantry is? It's not when the weather man or woman has said, hey, severe weather coming, I think we're going to have an ice storm. It's today. Well, not today because it's the 4th of July and stores are closed, but it's on a normal day when stores are open and there's not a panic, right? All right. Transportation. What does that look like for you? At some point, I hope we have an electric car. I think our family is going to end up with an electric car and then, a gas car. I know our society is not ready to transition super quick over to electric cars. But it's interesting, isn't it, to think about a sustained loss of electricity to the power grid, living in a house that is potentially self-sufficient because of solar panels and solar energy, and being able to have a car that you can still drive because you don't have to go gas it up and you can just refuel it through the sun at your house. That kind of gets into long term, which communication does as well. But what are your communication plans? Do you have chargers? You know, think about the cell phone. These towers that we have around are equipped with some battery backup, and so they can function for a while if the power grid goes down and we have a disruption. How long does your phone go in a day? I think at some point we all need to probably have better battery capacity and stored energy capacity in our houses. Okay, and I got to wrap this up because I've gone almost a half hour. Long term, think about solar power. We're thinking about that. I'd love to have solar power in our next house. I'd love to have enough solar power that we could take care of our energy needs without being connected to the grid. States are different right now in terms of what's it called, net metering, and whether or not you can sell your energy back to the grid and get paid or not, and all this stuff. There's a lot of aspects to this, but think about solar power and solar energy, especially if you're a homeowner. I like this. What are your silver dollar city skills? Okay, I have a friend who is just so adept and capable at so many different things, from hunting to butchering and cleaning his own deer to making sausage, making beer. He can make all kinds of things, and I want to learn some of those kinds of things. But hopefully we're not going to have any kind of breakdown in civil society. We did in Katrina, right? If you happen to live in New Orleans and Louisiana at that time, there was a sustained period of time where civil society broke down, and it was ugly. Things move into a barter economy in that kind of a situation. When electricity's down, you can't use your debit or credit card. Do you have cash on hand? But if you've got to feed yourself and your family and take care of them for a sustained period of time, how are you going to do that? So again, this is under my long-term category, but it's just something I've thought about. And when we were at Silver Dollar City, watching a blacksmith, watching a woman make candles, thinking about sort of the old ways of, how do we exist and live before, electronic internet and debit cards and even the power grid, which had a huge impact on our society. Go to Silver Dollar City and think about that. Ham radio, I'd like to personally, my granddad was a ham. I'd like to have a ham radio, but that's going to take time. It's going to take time to get it. I got to get licensed. I got to learn about that stuff. Why do I want a ham radio? Well, communication, again, I hope that none of this contingency stuff of power grid go down and things like that. I hope that never happens. But if it does, and my cell phone's dead and the tower doesn't work anymore because the electricity's out and the battery backup has been exhausted, how would we get communication? And this, again, is not just about our family. How would our community, how would our church, how would our neighborhood, how will we know what's going on in other parts of the world, the state? How will we get the word out? We need emergency. It's possible if something like this happens that there's localized losses of power, but communication is really, really important. So, hey, I'm going to put that on the record. I want to become a ham. I have a friend in California who did that recently, and I'm going to reach out to her to find out about that when I'm ready to do that. Skill development, I've already talked about some of this stuff, but how are your first aid skills? Okay, have you practiced lately? How's your CPR? Have you been trained lately? What's your proficiency with firearms? What's the proficiency of other people in your family? If you're incapacitated and you're unable for some reason to defend the house and you have a home invasion, is there somebody else that can pick up a weapon and defend your family? Those are all things to think about. What about cooking? What about survival? Wilderness survival looks different than urban survival, but these things can be fun. I actually love cooking and I love camping, and I love really a whole lot of skills that go around these things. They're fun, and they're also things that today in our modern society, not everybody has really thought about. And so I think those are important things to think about, and it takes time. We're not living in the Matrix world where, you just, call into the Nebuchadnezzar and say, hey, I need to learn how to fly this helicopter. Okay, that, Elon Musk is working on Neuralink, right, which is going to supposedly have this direct neural connection to our brains. That doesn't exist. It takes time. All right, here's my last thing, and I truly am going to wrap up. I wrote community of care. I believe that we want to live in communities of care. One of the things that I have loved seeking throughout my life, and I will continue to seek, is the church. Okay, I grew up Presbyterian. I grew up mainly in Manhattan, Kansas, in the First Presbyterian Church there. But I have had opportunities to live in different places. I lived in Mexico City. I lived in Colorado Springs. I lived in Lubbock, Texas, Oklahoma City. Now we're moving to Charlotte, North Carolina. Seeking the church. I had a conversation. Oh my gosh, my dog just tried to knock over the tripod with a stick in her mouth. Thank you, Rosie. I had a chance to have a conversation with one of our, well, I'm not going to reveal who it was, but it was someone who was incredibly nihilistic and so negative about the future and what is going to happen, and really about like an impending apocalypse. It was really kind of a crazy conversation that we talked for probably over an hour about all this. But his attitude was really just about take care of himself, take care of his family, and be ready to do anything that you need to include, I think, some things that I would consider to be incredibly immoral, to protect your family. I do believe in protecting my family. I do believe in protecting our community, but I also believe in a community of care. And in an emergency, in a situation where there's a lot of need and there's a lot of fear, one of the things that we want to do is keep a cool head. And one of the ways that we can do that is by being prepared, by thinking about things in advance. And I believe we want to take care of people. Can we take care of everyone? No, we can't. But could we feed our neighbors? If we have a well or a swimming pool, could we purify water and provide water for our neighborhood? What kinds of things can we do to help meet people's basic needs and care for them? And our capacities to do that change with time, right? I'm in my early 50s now. My parents are in their 80s. Like, there's different capacities that we have to provide for care. So I believe that we want to seek communities of care as a follower of Jesus. I want to seek other Christians and those that are following Christ and that want to live with the love of Christ in their heart, and to see part of the role that we have in this world, on this planet, as caring for people, as serving people. And so I have talked way longer than I thought. I was like, oh, I'll do this for 10 minutes. I've been talking for 37 minutes. I hope this is helpful to you. I also hope my phone actually saves this when I push this button. You can find other places to follow me by going to the website, wesfryer.com/after. My dog is going to really knock this over. And then the last thing I'll say is this Submarine Sermon series, which is kind of weird. Like, this brings together a lot of different things. But I've made a playlist on YouTube. You can just go to my YouTube channel, Google Wes Fryer YouTube, or youtube.com/wfryer. But you can also go to my shortened link, wfryer.me/sub for Submarine, and you can get to this playlist of videos, because I'm going to do more of these. Okay, now we get to find out if this video saved. Have a great day and a great 4th of July. Talk to you later.